give you one of the Little Rock Nine, Dr. Terrence Roberts.
You know, one of the amazing things about having been born in Little Rock, Arkansas, is that initially I didn't understand what was going on. I was shocked growing up there as a young child to discover the degree to which things had been in place for so long that tried to present life to me as being carved out with two essential spaces, one white, one black. And between those two spaces, a line of demarcation supported by law, supported by custom. I didn't really think it made sense. And that was hard for me because I had entered the universe with a DNA component that demanded rationality, demanded reason. And I couldn't find any in this whole scheme. But I tried to find out. I asked questions. I quizzed anybody I could get a hold of, but mainly the responses were not meaningful. Sometimes I was told not to even speak about these things because I could cause trouble. And that seemed rather disturbing to me because the trouble was already there, according to my estimate. When I got there, it was already trouble. But I did went to school, and this was probably one of the best things that happened to me. Going to school and learning how to learn. I remember being in first grade when the first grade teacher said to all of us 6-year-olds assembled there. I don't know if you guys had the same experience. But the teacher said, you must become the executive in charge of your own learning. You've got to take on CEO responsibility for your own independent learning and progress. That made such sense to me. I did that. And I found out stuff that really frightened me more. Because I found out that this stuff had been in place for centuries. You know, in 1954, as has been pointed out here, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in the Brown case that it was no longer constitutional to discriminate. In fact, I was 13 years old in 1954, and that made sense to me. That was something that made sense. Now we're talking. And yet, it was not a popular decision. There was a loud outcry against the Brown decision. I don't know what the outcry was here in Bismarck. I wasn't here at that point. Some of you were. You remember. But in any case, I thought, okay, I need to find out even more. So I began to trace back in time and carve through the historical record. And what I discovered was this. You could find a line all the way back from 1954 to 1619. See, 1619 is the year that the very first shipment of slaves were brought to Plymouth Rock. 1619. So from 1619 to 1954, virtually it was deemed constitutional throughout that period to discriminate. Like I said, I didn't know this when I first showed up, but I found out about it. And that really caused me to readjust my perspective. How many years? Oh, here we have a row of 6-year-old geniuses. 6 geniuses, older than 6 years old. How many years between 1619 and 1954? I'll give you some time to think about it. Okay. And you can use smartphones. But that's a long period of time. Some of you have already come up with the number, and she's doing it right now on the screen. And I'm not going to tell them, I'm going to wait for them to do it because it's a good exercise to go through it and discover this because it's a weighty matter. And the number is 1619, 1954. Oh, 1954 minus. Yeah, I forget it. I forget the language in the classroom. And the number is, wow, she said it and I believe it, 335 years. Wow, that's heavy. You think about it. 335 years. It was constitutional to discriminate in this country. It was legal for people to do unto Terry Roberts with impunity, with legal backing. I have no recourse. If you do something, and I don't care what it is, if you do something for 335 years, what's likely to happen? Yeah, you get good at it. Yeah, you develop some expertise. You become so able to do this thing, you never have to think about it. 335 years. Malcolm Gladwell has written a book, among his many writings. This book is called Outliers. In the book Outliers, he happens to mention that it takes 10,000 hours of concentrated practice to develop expertise in any arena of human endeavor. 10,000 hours. It occurred to me one day, why don't you find out how many 10,000 hour periods there are in 335 years? So I set about doing the math. You don't have to do this. I did the math, and it comes out to be 294. Conclusion, we the people of America, we the people of these United States of America, are practiced in the art of discrimination to the 294th power. Mathematicians, you already know what I'm talking about. Others of you who are beginning to get it. That's a powerful, weighty matter. And so there I am in Little Rock, Arkansas, feeling the weight of this thing, being discriminated against to the 294th power. It takes a lot to deal with that sort of thing. And so when the governor calls out his minions, things are really serious indeed. But you know what? The 9 of us by that time had determined that no matter the opposition, no matter the intensity of the opposition, we are going to do this thing. Why? Not because we're trying to prove a point, not because we thought it was exciting to do and a diversion for a potentially bored teenager. No. It was about the fact that we realized that this country stands for something. It has not lived up to everything it stands for, but this was an opportunity to help the country stand up and live out these principles. You know, every time I put my hand over my heart, and I do, I stand when requested to do so and salute the flag and repeat those words. I don't do that Pledge of Allegiance out of some sense of underscoring the reality. I repeat those words in hopes that someday they will indeed be true. Freedom, justice, liberty for all. No, that's not true. And yet, it is important to think that way, because if we don't think the thought, the thing itself may never, ever exist. And so we show up to school. Kids in those classes, many of them got up and walked out. And we were not together, by the way. Matter of fact, you might think of us that year, not so much as the Little Rock 9, but the Little Rock won 9 times. We were assigned homerooms based on our class standing, whether we were 10th, 11th, or 12th grade, and then further alphabetically by last name. None of our last names were near the same, and so we were spread out. There were days when we never saw each other until after school. As you remember Carlotta saying, we could not engage in extracurricular activities, so we met after school to go home as a group because there's safety in numbers. It was still dangerous. The danger did not stop at the school ground. It followed us home as well. That's another story. But in any case, those students who walked out said, we will not sit in a classroom with you black students. And again, my rational mind came to the fore, and I'm thinking to myself, why would you sacrifice your own opportunity to educate yourself in the name of segregation? It made no sense. And yet, there they went, out there with the mob. Going to school, however, proved to be a very challenging enterprise. It was not easy. I was quizzed once about whether or not I'd ever had thoughts of leaving that school. And my response, almost yelled out, was every second of every day. Every second of every day I felt like running, screaming out of that arena because it was hard. It was difficult. Physically, we were beaten. Psychologically, emotionally, we were disturbed. By the end of that school year, we were pretty battered. Absolutely. Absolutely. And yet, And yet, in spite of all of that, there was still that gold out there, whatever it was. It changed, actually. It wasn't the same every day. Some days the goal was just to survive, to wind up at the end of the day with your name not on the coroner's list. And that was sufficient for the day. Other days it was a loftier goal. But in any case, we were determined to stay. In fact, Jeff, who was in 10th grade that year, came home one day and told his brothers, he was one of 8 brothers, he said to his brothers, "I'm going to quit. I've had it. And they listened to it, complained, and then they sat him down and I said, "Jeff, let's just review what has been done to you. They've kicked you? Yes. They've hit you? Yes. They've spit on you? Yes. They've slapped you? Yes. They've knocked you downstairs? Yes. They've knocked you out? You were unconscious at one point? Yes. All of this." And they went on until the list was completed. And then they said, "Now, Jeff, is there anything else?" He said, "No, I don't think so." "Well, you'd be a fool to quit now," they said. That made sense. That was logical to Jeff. So he came back in. So we all had those situations where we were against the wall in terms of whether we could go back on any given day. And it was like that. Sometimes a very optimistic question is put, how long did it take for them to settle down and accept you? And if I can keep myself from laughing at the question, I will answer, it never happened. You see, the Army was there the entire school year. They were there from the first time we got into school with it until the last day of school. In fact, Ernie graduated that year. He was a lone senior. He went to that graduation with the Army. The others of us could not attend because that was considered too dangerous. Ernie's contingent consisted of his immediate family and him. Parentheses, his immediate family actually included Dr. Martin Luther King. It was early in his ministry, not too many people knew who he was, so he was able to pass himself off as a family member, and he attended. After the graduation, we all met together at the home of Daisy Bates, another very important player in this whole drama, and discussed what had happened. We were all concerned about Ernie's safety, and he reported that one kid had spit on him, but other than that, it was a successful venture. He got his diploma, and that was the goal. You see, if you have a goal, you can often find a way to get through the rough times. You can deal with the issues. You know why? Because none of that stuff that happened had anything to do with who we were. It was not definitive of us as a group of 9 kids. I had learned that lesson earlier, by the way, from home. My mom taught me, only you, Terry Roberts, only you can define who you are. When other people, they call you names. Of course, you don't have that at your schools. You go to more enlightened institutions. But if you were to visit such a school where kids call each other's names, you could tell them Terry Roberts said this, if the name they call isn't your name, it has nothing to do with you. Yeah. You know how that goes? It goes like this. I'm walking down the hallway, somebody yells out, "Hey, stupid!" What have I done? By turning around, I've signed a social contract that stupid applies to me. Why am I turning around? That just makes so much sense to me. And I told one student that at one school, and he said, no, if somebody calls me stupid, I hit him. I said, "No." He said, "Yes." "Why?" "Because he called me stupid." "But is stupid your name?" "No." "Well, why do you hit him?" "Because he called me stupid." See? Circular reasoning. I finally got this kid to understand that if he heard the word stupid yelled out, and that truly was not his name, that message was not meant for him. "Wow," he said, "you're stupid." "Okay." He finally got it. Why does it take so long for people to figure that out? See, I was fortunate in having that knowledge beforehand. In fact, kids used to call all kinds of names in my presence. I would not respond or react to them. What I did, though, interestingly enough, to maintain my own psychological balance, was to rate the name calling on the basis of creativity. I would listen to the names. I would listen very carefully. Oh, I had a rating scale of 1 to 10. 1, oh, not too good. 10, wow, I like that. I might use it. Nobody that year scored above 2 on my scale of creativity. You see, you use what you need to use, but by taking charge of that situation, by turning it around so that I had the agency to rate the creativity, it took all of the sting out of it. Besides that, knowing that they weren't able to be more creative than that gave me another thought. What does that mean? Maybe they're not too learned. Maybe they're not too sharp after all. And that gave rise to another thought. I think probably some of their anger at our being there is because we, by our mere presence there, explode the myth of white superiority. Oh yeah. Think about it. Here you have a group of white kids in Arkansas at Central High School. Most of whom, not all, but most of whom have been steeped in this ideology that they are by definition better than, superior to, all black kids. Nonsense, totally. But they believed it, you see. And then we show up and give the lie to that business. Anger erupted. That was unfortunate. Nothing I could do about it, except to understand it. But in any case, the year went on. We completed the year, and as was reported, the next year the governor closed all the schools because he didn't want to continue any of this. The governor was in a bind, you see. He was a person who had chosen to adopt principles of segregation. That wasn't the kind of man he was as a young person. He grew up in what might be termed a liberal household in Arkansas, relatively speaking, but there it was. And yet, as governor, he knew without doubt he would not be reelected if he didn't support the segregationist agenda. But he wrestled with this question, what to do? I have these black kids coming to Central High School, I don't want that. It looks bad for me as governor, since it's a segregationist state. I can just hear it happening. One night, he's tossing and turning in bed, and then he gets this bright idea. Just imagine the light bulb over his head. I got it. I'll close the schools. That will keep them out. Keep the white kids out too, but the government didn't think about that. This, kids, is sometimes what you'll find. Even though the person is an elected official, there is no requirement that you have a measurable IQ to hold public office. After the governor closed the schools, I was presented with a potential dilemma. And yet, rather than see it as a dilemma, I found a resolution. I had relatives who lived in Los Angeles who always told me from the beginning of this whole saga, if things get too bad for you, you can always move out to California. I took them up on it. I left Little Rock. You know, if you've been to Little Rock, and you've been there for a while, and you leave, there's no real incentive to go racing back. So I convinced my family of origin to follow me to Los Angeles, and we became Californians. And I've lived there ever since, really. So that's as far in the saga as we need to go right now. You know, this has been very brief, but you get a sense of what that was all about. Tragically, those issues we faced in 1957 are very similar to issues we faced in the year 2013. And perhaps later we can talk about that in the Q&A. Thank you for inviting me here, and I look forward to talking to you.